On March 10, 2025, the conflict in Ukraine continued with both diplomatic efforts and military actions underway. Russia maintained its public stance of desiring peace, but did not offer any concessions, a position that stands in contrast to the concessions that Ukraine has already suggested. Reports from Reuters on March 9 indicated that U.S. officials planned to use talks with Ukraine and Saudi Arabia on March 11 to assess Ukraine's willingness to make significant compromises to end the war. One U.S. official conveyed that Ukraine could not simultaneously express a desire for peace and a refusal to compromise. Another U.S. official stated the U.S. aimed to determine if Ukraine was interested in not just peace, but a realistic peace. Further details emerged from the Financial Times, which reported on March 9 that officials briefed on the upcoming U.S.-Ukrainian negotiations suggested Ukraine would propose a partial ceasefire specifically for long-range drone and missile strikes, as well as combat operations in the Black Sea. Suspiln, a Ukrainian outlet, reported on March 10 that a source familiar with Ukraine's delegation stated they would also propose a prisoner of war exchange. This source emphasized that these proposals were realistic and could be implemented and controlled quickly. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had initially suggested a ceasefire in the air and sea on March 5. These proposed ceasefires from Ukraine are designed to be straightforward, avoiding the need for extensive negotiations or complex monitoring processes. Zelensky has also indicated a willingness to consider concessions on territory, Ukraine's NATO membership, and his own term in office to achieve a just and lasting peace, including in a February 28 interview with Fox News. In contrast to Ukraine's apparent flexibility, Russian officials have consistently reiterated President Vladimir Putin's demands from 2021 and 2022. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, in an interview published on March 10, asserted that any future peace settlement must eradicate the root causes of the war. Lavrov defined these root causes as alleged threats to Russia's security from Ukraine and the West due to NATO's eastward expansion, and the Ukrainian government's supposed extermination of anything connected to Russia and the Russian world, including language, culture, orthodoxy, and media. This definition aligns with Lavrov's statements from late December 2024, indicating that the Kremlin's rhetoric on this matter has remained unchanged despite U.S.-Russian bilateral talks in February 2024. Russia's unchanging demands stand in stark contrast to the flexibility shown by Ukraine. Russian officials also continued their efforts to create division between the U.S. and Europe by capitalizing on statements and actions of the Trump administration. Lavrov claimed that U.S. and Russian diplomats voted similarly for the first time in 3 years against a UN resolution on February 24, a resolution supported by Ukraine and Europe. This resolution commemorated the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion, recognized Russia as the aggressor, called for a just peace, and supported Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Lavrov asserted that ultra-liberal ruling elites of the West support Ukraine and accused EU countries and the UK of maintaining predatory colonial habits. Notably, Lavrov did not mention the US in this context, potentially aiming to sow ideological discord between the US and Europe. This rhetoric echoes Putin's February 27 claim that some Western elites seek to maintain global instability and disrupt the US-Russian dialogue. Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service further claimed on March 10 that the UK government was prioritizing undermining Trump's peace efforts and had tasked non-governmental organizations with demonizing him. These claims from the SVR came before the UK was set to host a virtual meeting on March 15 with primarily European and British Commonwealth countries to discuss a ceasefire agreement. It is likely that Russian officials are attempting to exploit Trump administration statements to divide the US and Europe, hoping to secure maximum concessions on Ukraine and weaken the US-Europe relationship to Russia's advantage. On the military front, Russian forces were reported to be consolidating their gains in Kursk Oblast and were likely preparing for an attack on Sudza. Geolocated footage from March 10 indicated Russian advances in central Martinovka, northeast of Sudza. Elements of the Russian 44th Army Corps and the 1434th Akhmat Chechnya Regiment were reportedly involved in attacks near Martinovka. Russian mill bloggers made claims of Russian forces seizing Agronom, Kalmykov, Mikhailovka, and Bogdanovka, all east or north of Sudza, as well as advances in Mirny and Kazakya Lochnia, also near Sudza. However, These claims have not been independently confirmed. Russian mill bloggers also claimed attacks on the outskirts of Sudza from various directions. Reports indicated that elements of several Russian naval infantry brigades and potentially up to 2 battalions of North Korean forces were attacking south of Sudza near Kurilovka and Gayevo. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces were actively counterattacking along the international border. Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief General Alexander Syrsky stated on March 10th that Ukraine was reinforcing its units in Kursk and Sumy oblasts with additional drone and electronic warfare capabilities, and was successfully countering the threat of Russian encirclement. Ukrainian State Border Service spokesperson Andriy Demchenko reported that Ukrainian forces were working to repel Russian attacks towards Novenk and Zurovka, northeast of Sumy city, and noted that Russian forces were attempting to cut Ukraine's main ground line of communication along the Sumy city-Sudza highway. Russian mill bloggers also reported Ukrainian counterattacks near Novenk, Zurovka, and Basivka, also northeast of Sumy city. Elements of the Russian 83rd Airborne Brigade were reportedly operating in Zurovka. Demchenko assessed that Russian forces currently do not have the capacity to conduct a significant cross-border operation into other areas of northern Ukraine. Ukraine continued its efforts to bolster its defense capabilities through increased domestic production of drones and air defense systems. On March 9th, Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov signed a memorandum of understanding with German defense manufacturer Diehl Defense to triple the supply of Iris-T air defense systems and missiles to Ukraine and establish longer-term industrial projects to strengthen Ukraine's air defense. Gleb Konevsky, director of the Procurement Policy Department of Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, reported on March 10th that the ministry planned to purchase approximately 4.5 million first-person view drones from domestic producers in 2025, which is the projected limit of Ukrainian domestic drone production for the year. The ministry announced an estimated allocation of 102 billion Ukrainian hryvnia, approximately $2.4 billion, for this initiative. Vladislav Belba, CEO of Ukrainian Armor LLC, announced on March 10th that the company was on track to produce at least 50% more Noveta armored vehicles in 2025 compared to 2024, aiming to provide Ukrainian forces with several hundred armored vehicles. By August 2024, the company had delivered over 100 armored vehicles. Ukraine is significantly expanding its domestic production of drones and air defense systems. Recent military activities also included Ukrainian forces striking an oil refinery in Ryazan Oblast on the night of March 8th to 9th, which reportedly provides fuel for the Russian military, including jet engines. Ukrainian forces also struck an oil refinery in Samara Oblast on the night of March 9th to 10th, a major refinery supplying fuel to Russian forces in Ukraine, including for supersonic aircraft. Russia claimed to have downed drones in both instances. In eastern Ukraine, specifically in Kharkiv Oblast, Russian forces continued offensive operations in the north near Vovchansk on March 10th, but made no advances. A Ukrainian brigade spokesperson noted that Russian infantry assaults were being conducted in the area due to Ukrainian drones creating a red zone that prevented the operation of Russian armored vehicles. In Luhansk Oblast, Russian forces continued offensive operations in the Kupiansk and Borova directions on March 10th, without confirmed advances. There were unconfirmed claims of a small Ukrainian advance northeast of Kupiansk, which a Ukrainian military spokesperson declined to comment on. Russian forces attempted to cross the Oskol River, with reports suggesting some infantry groups managed to cross but were struggling to establish a bridgehead before the river ice melts. Russian forces also intensified airstrikes, aerial reconnaissance, and drone strikes in the Borova direction. In the Lyman direction, unconfirmed Russian claims suggested advances southwest of Zurovka, and Russian forces reportedly intensified attacks in the area. In Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces continued offensive operations in the Siversk direction without advancing, facing unsuccessful armored vehicle attacks, according to Ukrainian reports. In the Chasiv direction, Russian forces continued attacks but did not advance. There was speculation within the Ukrainian military that Russia might replace the commander of the 98th Airborne Division due to their failure to seize Chasiv Yar by March 1st. Russian forces recently achieved advances in the Toretsk direction, with geolocated footage confirming advances along Tobolenka Street in western Toretsk and Ukrainian General Staff maps indicating advances south of Krymsk. Russia reportedly transferred units from other directions to reinforce their efforts in Toretsk, where fighting was intensifying with increased use of light and armored vehicles by Russian forces. Both Ukrainian and Russian forces recently made advances in the Pokrovsk direction. Geolocated footage confirmed Ukrainian advances in central Shevchenko and eastern Udakny, while Russian advances were confirmed along Moskovska Street in southern Tarasivka and north and northeast of Herdivka. Heavy fighting continued in the Pokrovsk area, with both sides claiming counterattacks. There were reports of potential armor shortages on the Russian side and effective Ukrainian drone operations hindering Russian logistics. Unconfirmed reports suggested Russian forces had approached the administrative border of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast in the Pokrovsk direction, though confirmed footage only showed them to be roughly 3.5 kilometers away. In the Kurakov and Velika Novosilka directions, Russian forces continued offensive operations on March 10th, but did not make confirmed advances. In the southern axis, neither side reported ground attacks in the Huliapol direction. Russian forces continued offensive operations in western Zaporizhia Oblast without confirmed advances, though some unconfirmed Russian sources claimed progress. Russian forces also conducted offensive operations in the Dnipro direction in Kherson Oblast on March 9th and 10th, but did not advance. Russia continued its air, missile, and drone campaign, launching a significant series of drone strikes against Ukraine on the night of March 9th to 10th. Ukraine reported downing 130 Shahid and decoy drones out of 176 launched, with drones striking Kharkiv, Poltava, and Kiev oblasts. On the mobilization and force generation front, Russian President Vladimir Putin approved a list of instructions on March 10th aimed at increasing social benefits for Russian veterans, which is expected to further strain the Russian budget and economy. These measures included extending the Defenders of the Fatherland Foundation's support to families of missing in action servicemen, supporting veterans' entrepreneurship, classifying participants of the full-scale invasion as combat veterans, and considering extending social support to siblings and unadopted children of deceased servicemen. Putin also created a commission in the State Council to coordinate support for veterans. Russian federal subjects also continued to increase financial incentives for military recruitment, with Irkutsk Oblast increasing its one-time payment for signing a military service contract to 1 million rubles. Regarding technological adaptations, the All-Russian People's Front's Kulibin Club claimed the creation of the Q-10 drone with artificial intelligence to improve responsiveness, reduce energy consumption, and stabilize flight, with frontline testing reportedly underway. In Russian-occupied areas, authorities continued to integrate these territories into the Russian system, with the announcement of the Zaporizhia Oblast resident card, a part of Russia's Mir payment system. There were no significant activities reported in Belarus. In a video address on March 10th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky emphasized that diplomacy will only be strong with strong frontline positions, highlighting the ongoing efforts to meet Ukraine's frontline needs. He reported on Defense Minister Umerov's contacts with international partners, noting that Poland was preparing support packages and participating in the Czech initiative for ammunition. Zelensky expressed anticipation for an expedited delivery of Iris-T air defense systems and ammunition from Germany, underscoring Germany's crucial role in European and global security. He also mentioned ongoing work with the European Union to address supply shortages and noted the Netherlands' readiness to continue investing in weapons production in Ukraine. Full support from the Nordic and Baltic states was also acknowledged, signifying new packages, investments in weapons production, and political initiatives. Zelensky announced his upcoming visit to Saudi Arabia and the further preparation for a meeting between Ukrainian and U.S. teams there, expressing hope for results in bringing peace closer and continuing support. A report from Financial Times highlighted concerns that the situation in the Kursk region could become catastrophic due to the halt in U.S. aid. The report indicated that in the initial days without U.S. military support, Ukrainian forces were compelled to cede a significant portion of the territory they had captured in Kursk Oblast the previous year. A Ukrainian military blogger, Bohdan Moroshnikov, described the situation as very difficult and potentially catastrophic if urgent measures to clear logistical routes are not taken. The article noted that roads used by Ukraine to supply its forces in Kursk Oblast were under constant attack from kamikaze drones. It also mentioned that the Ukrainian-controlled territory in the region had shrunk by nearly two-thirds since August of the previous year due to intense attacks by Russian and North Korean forces. While the immediate impact of the lack of U.S. weapons was not yet critical due to the increased reliance on drones, a Ukrainian official cautioned that the current stabilization, achieved partly due to Russian exhaustion from continuous offensives, was temporary and that Russian forces would likely regroup and attack again. In a separate report, Donald Trump stated that neither Ukraine nor Russia has any cards in the ongoing conflict and that they should reach an agreement to stop the killings in what he termed a senseless war. He clarified his earlier statement that Ukraine had no cards, indicating that Russia also lacks them. Trump reiterated his belief that the war would not have occurred if he were president in 2022 and suggested that Ukraine would sign an agreement regarding mineral resources, adding that the current week could bring significant steps.